All right, good afternoon. Martin Griffiths, the special envoy for Yemen, said today in a statement that he's extremely concerned about the military developments in Hodeidah. Further military escalation will have serious consequences on the dire humanitarian situation in the country and will have an impact on his efforts to resume political negotiations to reach an inclusive political settlement to the conflict in Yemen. He reiterated that there is no military solution to the conflict. Mr. Griffiths said he is in constant contact with all the parties involved to negotiate arrangements for Hodeidah that would address political, humanitarian, and security concerns for all the concerned parties. He calls on the parties to engage constructively with the UN's efforts to spare Hodeidah any military confrontation. He also calls on the parties to exercise restraint and to give peace an opportunity. The UN and its humanitarian partners are present in Hodeidah, and we are continuing to work and deliver the most critical programs in partnerships with local organizations. Humanitarian partners have positioned 70,000 rapid response kits at various humanitarian service points across the governorate, including in Hodeidah City. Rapid response kits include food rations for a family for 2 weeks, as well as hygiene items and other essential goods. They're intended to cover people's most immediate needs in line with planning projections. Partners will provide rapid response kits to the newly displaced families. In addition to vulnerable families are receiving monthly food rations, hygiene kits, non-food item kits, emergency shelter kits, and protection services. Partners are also providing fuel for water pumps and emergency rooms, as well as sewage pumps and support for healthcare services. All parties must uphold their obligations to facilitate humanitarian assistance, including by ensuring access and refraining from targeting humanitarian supplies or other assets. Aid operations will be severely challenged in the event of sustained fighting in densely populated urban areas. People seeking to flee conflict-affected areas must be allowed to do so without any hindrance. And we'll be updating the situation in Hodeidah as we get more information. Turning to Syria, Stéphane de Mistura, the special envoy for Syria, has invited senior officials from Iran, Russia, and Turkey to Geneva for consultations on the 18th and 19th of June on the way ahead in the establishment of a constitutional committee, and they have accepted, he has told us. The special envoy will in addition be inviting other countries for relevant discussions in due course. He will update the press corps during a press encounter in Geneva tomorrow. Meanwhile, we continue to be deeply concerned for the safety and protection of up to 2.5 million civilians in Idlib governorate, including some 1.2 million internally displaced people following continued airstrikes in the area. At least 66 women, children, and men have reportedly lost their lives, and scores more have been injured in airstrikes over the past week. Our humanitarian colleagues also continue to receive alarming reports of airstrikes endangering and killing civilians in Hasake governorate following a recent intensification of anti-Daesh operations. And according to a new study by the UN Relief and Works Agency, otherwise known as UNRWA, infant mortality, which most parts of the world is decreasing, has not declined for the last decade in Gaza. The director of UNRWA's health department, Akihiro Seita, said this is an extraordinary warning sign and alarming trend in the overall situation, not only of health for infants, but also the health of the entire Palestine refugee population in Gaza. Infant mortality is a barometer of health of an entire population. The new study found that the infant mortality rate among Palestine refugees in Gaza was 22.7 per 1,000 live births. This is within the same range of previously reported of 22.4 per 1,000 live births in 2015 and 20.2 per 1,000 live births from the study concluded in 2006. And in a statement we issued, we'll go back here. The special representative for the Secretary General for Central Africa, Francois Lanseny-Fall, briefed the Security Council this morning, warning that serious threats remain on the political, security, and socioeconomic stability in the region. All 11 countries that are under his area are either in the middle or at the start of an electoral cycle, he noted. They are experiencing political tensions, including countries impacted by conflicts, such as the Central African Republic or the Democratic Republic of the Congo. Mr. Fall detailed recent political developments in Chad, Gabon, and the Republic of Congo and Burundi. He also stressed that violence in Cameroon, both linked to Boko Haram and tensions in the Anglophone areas, were a source of major concern. The UN will continue to call on all people to refrain from any acts of violence, he said. Mr. Fall also stressed the situation in the Central African Republic continues to have a negative impact on the situation in the region, with massive movements of population. And yesterday, the Undersecretary General for Humanitarian Affairs and Emergency Relief Coordinator, Mark Lowcock, said he's increasingly concerned by the situation in the Sahel, where nearly 6 million people are struggling to meet their daily food needs. Severe malnutrition is also threatening the lives of 1.6 million children in the region. These are levels unseen since the crisis of 2012 and the most critical in the months still ahead. The crisis was triggered by scarce and erratic rainfall in 2017, which resulted in acute water, crop, pasture, and pasture shortages and livestock losses. With support from the UN and its partners, national authorities in the impacted countries have developed response plans focusing on pastoral and food security needs. A scaled-up operation to reach 3.6 million people with food security interventions is already underway. However, the United Nations response plan across the 6 countries is only 26% funded. Mr. Lowcock called on donors to urgently provide further funding, adding that the worst could still be averted. And in a statement we issued yesterday afternoon, the Secretary General welcomed the agreement settling the differences between Greece and the former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia on the so-called name issue. The Secretary General commended the parties for their determination to bring the long-standing dispute to an end, and he also paid tribute to his personal envoy, Matthew Nimitz, who he said embodied the values of perseverance, patience, and quiet diplomacy in facilitating this historic agreement. That statement and one from Mr. Nimitz itself have been distributed. And we also issued a statement yesterday from the Secretary General welcoming the formation of a new government in Madagascar and the recent appointment of Christian Nitsay as Prime Minister. He appealed to all, the Secretary General appealed to all political actors to strengthen the country and reiterated the commitment of the UN to support peaceful, credible, and inclusive elections this year. And our colleagues at the UN Office of Drugs and Crime today released a study that says at least 2.5 million migrants were smuggled worldwide in 2016. Migrant smuggling occurred in all regions of the world and generated an income for smugglers of $7 billion in 2016. The study found that smugglers advertise their business where migrants can easily be reached. This includes neighborhoods that are home to diasporic communities, refugee camps, and various social networks. The report recommends making regular migration opportunities more accessible in origin countries and refugee camps, improving international cooperation to tackle smuggling networks, and raise awareness in communities of origin about the dangers involved in smuggling. And the Food and Agriculture Organization and its Global Soil Partnership today launched a new program to boost soil productivity and reduce soil degradation for greater food and nutrition security in Africa. The AfriSoils program aims to increase soil productivity in 47 African countries by 30% and reduce soil degradation by 25%. Africa is the second driest continent, with nearly half of the surface made up of desert, 40% of it affected by desertification. Out of 815 million undernourished people globally, 240 million are from Africa. And today is the International Day of Albinism Awareness. In his message, the Secretary General urged for more to be done globally to raise awareness about the challenges that people with albinism face so they can live free of discrimination. And he commends the Regional Action Plan on Albinism in Africa, which has been endorsed by the African Commission on Human Rights and People's Rights, as well as the Pan-African Assembly. Masoud, you seem very eager this morning.
Stéphane, on this,
Yes, sir.
two questions. One is about North Korea. And it seems that the United Nations was not kept in the loop by the Trump administration or the North Koreans as to what was the deal. as it was, because it's very unclear exactly what has been achieved and what is still left to be achieved.
I think, as the Secretary General said to you a couple of days ago, the United Nations is not protagonist in these talks. The Secretary General of the United Nations system is there to assist the parties and others in trying to reach the goal of denuclearization. Contacts will be had with various parties, and we will see how we can assist. And that was also the very clear message from the Director General of the International Atomic Energy Agency.
A situation in Yemen where the Saudi-led coalition is about to attack or has already attacked the port city Hudaybah and the port city of Yemen and so forth. Is United Nations aware? Because the appeals by the UN special coordinators and UNICEF...
Well, I think we're, Masood, with all due respect, I think we're much more than just aware. As you know, we continue to have UN staff in Hodeidah Governorate. We are there to stay and to deliver, trying to help in whatever way we can to appease, to make this humanitarian situation slightly better. There are millions of people that risk of being impacted in what is already a disastrous situation. Martin Griffiths, who leads the UN's political efforts, is in Amman. He's been in touch with all the parties, and the underlying message continues to be the same: that there is no solution but a political solution, and that continues to be the message we deliver to the parties. Excuse me?
Has he talked, Secretary General, talked to Saudi partners or Saudi Arabians?
Mr. Griffiths is in touch with all the parties.
Same topic.
Mr. Klein, and then Edie.
Yes, does the Secretary General have any opinion on whether individuals who flee gang violence or domestic violence should be eligible for asylum in the country to which they flee to?
Look, there is a global discussion going on under the aegis of the United Nations on migration, on this mass movement of people, which includes discussions between countries of origin, countries of transit, countries of destination, to try to come up with solutions that respect the sovereign rights of every member state. There is international refugee law, which needs to be respected, and obviously member states have the sovereign right to decide on policy.
But under that refugee convention, as I recall, the criteria really relate to persecution based on specific criteria like national origin, religion, etc. And normally it's persecution by the government that triggers the rights and obligations.
International refugee law says what it says. It is important that anyone seeking refugee status be treated with respect and with dignity. Edie, I will come back to you. Edie.
Thank you, Steph. The Secretary General said in his statement yesterday, welcoming the decision of the Prime Ministers of Greece and the former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia, the agreement on a name for Macedonia, now North Macedonia, that he hoped that this would spur other conflict countries to follow suit and reach similar agreements. Did he have any conflicts in mind?
I think any place where there continues to be violence and conflict is a place the Secretary General was thinking about. I think we see with the name issue, it's taken a long time, but conflict was avoided, and it is the power of diplomacy, in a sense. But we talk about other conflicts here every day, about the need for political solutions, whether it's in Yemen or in Syria. And I think the Secretary General would like all the parties involved in those conflicts to heed his call. Mr. Lee.
Sure. I wanted to ask you on Yemen. First, who the UN thinks is calling the shots. All the various calls that were made to not begin the assault, which began last night. Many people are saying the UAE, not as opposed to, but along with Saudi Arabia, but that the UAE is very central to it. And so I guess, and they made the threat. The foreign minister of the UAE said 48 hours and we're going in. Did the Secretary General or Mr. Martin Griffiths, at what level have they reached out to the UAE?
They've been speaking to various parties, to those who have influence on the parties, but I'm not going to get into detail.
And I'm asking in part because former UN envoy to Libya, Bernardino Leon, with some fanfare, went to be, I don't know if he's the head of, but he's a major figure in the UAE Diplomatic Academy. Say again?
I recall.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so I guess I'm wondering, obviously he's no longer with the UN, but I would assume he's someone that UN people know.
I'm not aware
this
that.
seems like
I'm
a
not aware
diplomatic gambit
that. I'm not
to make a
aware
threat
that.
and
I'm not
then-
aware that Mr. Leon has had any contact with anyone at the UN.
Okay, and I guess given that the statement by UNICEF about the impact on children in Hodeidah, and this was a statement made before the assault began, and given the children in armed conflict mandate, would you say that this is inconsistent with having listed the coalition, or does it cause a rethinking of listing the coalition as one that takes children's safety seriously?
The safety and the violence, the safety of children, the violence caused upon children is one of great concern to the Secretary General that has been going on in Yemen. There is a process under which the report of the Secretary General's report on children in armed conflict is being produced. It should be coming out soonish. That report will look back at 2017, and you'll be free to make your own analysis. Mr. Roth.
Thank you. If you could speak more directly into the mic, it could be the distance. It's hard to hear you back here, but
we're both getting old, Richard. What can I tell you?
Well, one of us. I'm Benjamin Button. The Middle East, you're going to have a big vote today, and you've talked about it in other days, but is the idea of the Secretary General taking action, fact-finding mission, the resolution will vote, is he going to take actual action, or is this whole idea dead about...
You know, the General Assembly is discussing the issue of... the issue you mentioned this afternoon at 3 o'clock. I think Brendan will have more details on it. We will obviously take note and act upon whatever is requested of the Secretary General by the resolution, but we have to see what the member states come up with and what they agree on. Abdelhamid.
Thank you, Stéphane. I have two questions. In Austria, a few days ago, the government shut down 7 mosques and kicked out 50 imams with no real explanation. I came to the spokesman office, I asked about it, and the deputy spokesman said that we are waiting for a statement from the human rights groups. Was there any statement first?
I don't know if anything came out of the High Commissioner for Human Rights Office.
So can I ask you to follow up with that and see why this
we will follow up.
Massive expulsion?
What is your second question, sir?
Okay, my second question, last Friday, there were 4 people killed, including a child of 15 years old. His name is Haytham Muhammad Khalil Al-Jamal. He was 15, together with 3 others. And about 237 were wounded, including journalists, 11 children, women, and paramedics. Not one single statement, as far as I know, maybe I am wrong, issued on what happened last Friday.
I think the Secretary General, his special coordinators have repeatedly condemned the loss of civilian life, and we've, as a matter of principle, have called for investigations looking into the circumstances of those losses.
But does that answer my question?
Well, I've answered to the best of my capabilities. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Stéphane. I have 2 questions also, but short ones. The first one is about Aquarius, the ship that's trapped in the Mediterranean with no European country wanting to accept it until Spain's Pedro Sanchez finally said they can dock in Valencia. Can you confirm this? And also, can we hope that UN is not going to join European countries' ostrich policies, so to say, and come up with a long-term solution about this migrants issue? Thank you.
On your first question, I'm not able to confirm from here. I would urge you to check with our colleagues at the UN Migration Agency at UNHCR. I mean, I think to accuse the UN of following an ostrich policy is misreading the situation. I think, as I just told Joe, we have the Global Compact on Migration, which is being debated intensively here. And the Secretary General's idea is to come up with a global compact that everyone can agree upon. Countries of origin, countries of transit, countries of destination that respect the rights of people, that respect the rights of the rights of migrants to be treated with dignity, that ensures that refugee law is respected. As the Secretary General himself said a couple of days ago, he's concerned about the shrinking space for refugee law that we've seen in Europe recently. So.
Just one remark. By no means I'm accusing UN. UN is our last best hope to see some positive change in the world. And my second short question was about vote in Argentina to approve legal abortions. What is Secretary General's opinion about legal abortions?
No, I have no. We'll see how the vote goes. Yes, Carla.
I also have two questions.
Must be Wednesday. Go ahead.
Yeah. Follow up on Mr. Abadi's question and mine a few days ago. Why is the UN not encouraging a peace treaty to be signed between North Korea and the warring parties of 70 years ago? And why emphasizing only denuclearization, which, if a state of war exists...
I think
okay, that's the first.
As a matter of principle, we stand for peace, and we encourage peace treaties. There is a process ongoing on the Korean Peninsula. We are following that process. It is going step by step. What we want to see is a peaceful Korean Peninsula. What is your next question?
The next question is this Belt and Road Conference that's being held. There's evidently no information available about it. Can you tell us something about it? Who is attending, or?
I'm not aware of...
Conference room 12.
Okay, I'm not aware. Yes, sir.
Bonjour, monsieur. Deepak Arora from the Tribune Online. Please hear me out. I know your stand on this, on the migration. There are 700,000 Rohingyas in Bangladesh, and towards the end of May, their Prime Minister had visited India and requested Indian Prime Minister to create some conducive environment so that these migrants can go back to Myanmar. Similarly, India has 70,000 these migrants in one of the northeastern states, bordering state. So could you just tell us that what is the thought of the Secretary General so that this quickly happens? Because these migrants are living in very bad conditions, and they really want to go back to their country.
Look, our principal position is that refugees cannot be forced to return home. Returns have to be safe, they have to be voluntary, they have to be dignified. In terms of Myanmar, we need to see the right conditions in Rakhine State to allow people to return home under those conditions. The United Nations, through its country team in Myanmar, is there to support the government to try to implement the recommendations of the Annan Commission, and also to help create those conditions so that people can go home. But the returns need to be voluntary, they need to be safe, and they need to be dignified. Yes, go ahead, your follow-up.
Okay. Now I understand that there is an agreement between Russia, Ukraine, and United Nations.
Between
Russia, Ukraine, and United Nations for peacekeeping forces there. Could you give us some details?
No, I'm not. I mean, any deployment of peacekeeping force would need a Security Council mandate. So I'm not aware of any agreement along those lines. Ben?
Yeah. Can you confirm if the Secretary General got a letter from the President of Yemen, and if so, can you let us know what it's about?
Yes and no. I just checked upstairs. No letter had been received as of yet through our main mailbox system. So we'll wait to see when the letter arrives. Sometimes the actual letter delivery process is a little slower than the announcement of a letter having been sent or received, but I will keep you posted. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I do want to...
No. Gentleman behind you who has not yet had a question.
Okay.
Okay.
You yield, I know.
Yeah, yesterday, Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesman said, this is a question on the sanctions on the DPRK. He said the relevant Security Council resolutions stipulate that we shall adjust sanction measures as may be needed in light of DPRK's compliance, including suspending or lifting relevant sanction measures. What's your comment?
There are sanctions imposed by the Security Council. It is up to each and every member states to implement and to follow those sanctions. How that's done, that is up to each member state. Mr. Klein.
Yes, thank you. I just want to follow up on my earlier questions here to drill down a little bit. As the Secretary General,
I'm not going down with you.
Well,
you can try, but go ahead.
I will try, and you can answer or not as you will. What I'm trying to understand, because the Secretary General in his prior UN position obviously has long-standing experience and knowledge of the refugee issue. So does he look at refugees as encompassing individuals who claim to be fleeing gang violence and so forth that the governments in those countries are not controlling? And does he see any distinction between individuals migrating for that reason versus economic migrants?
Look, refugee law is clear. It's about people fleeing persecution. Obviously, the assessment, people go through screening. That is done most usually through the country that is receiving them. The issue of migration, the issue of refugees as we see it now, needs to be solved constructively through global dialogue while respecting the sovereign rights of member states. Masood.
Thank you, Stéphane. Thank you very much. Maybe you have reacted to this earlier. The Human Rights Watch has been saying that what the lethal use of force by the Israelis is a war crime.
The what, sorry?
The lethal force.
Yeah.
Use of lethal force in Gaza could be a war crime. Does the Secretary General have any opinion about that?
I would refer you to the numerous briefings done by the Special Coordinator and the Secretary General to the Security Council on the issue of the use of force. Mr. Lee.
Sure. I wanted to ask you about Cameroon. I was listening to what Mr. Fall said, and I just wondered, it seemed that on Monday, a report was put out by Amnesty International detailing in some detail firsthand accounts of torture, burning of villages, murder of suspects. And so I just, one, can he do a stakeout? If he's the Secretary General's envoy on the region? Number two,
but as you know, he hasn't been to in Cameroon in some time.
Right, because other council members praised his engagement. I wanted to ask you that. There's no engagement that you haven't announced from here.
Not that I'm aware of.
Right.
I'm not hiding any engagement.
Right. So, I mean, is the Secretary General satisfied with not necessarily the performance of Mr. Fall, but with the engagement of the government, given an Amnesty International report detailing the torching of villages?
I think we have expressed and will continue to express our concern about the developments.
And I wanted to ask, you may not know, but photos have come out of UNDSS personnel in Buea, which is a town in Anglophone Cameroon. Quite a few of them, and so people don't know what they're doing there. This goes back to the sort of distrust from the blue helmet at one of the torching sites. Yeah. Is there some way you can find out if there's some? Is there some engagement taking place? And I wanted to. You probably have something on this. Nepal seems to have publicly announced that they're asking the UN DPA office to decamp and end its engagement. Is the UN? What's the time plan for doing that? Do you have any sort of closeout statements on that?
We are aware of the situation. I have some guidance, but I need to. I'll get it to you. Thank you.
And one thing on sexual abuse.
Yes.
I think okay. Some new cases have been disclosed, and that's all. Again, it's all to the good to be disclosing. But I did want to ask. It's a little unclear to me because in a category called investigation, the most recent one involves a Moroccan peacekeeper, and it says investigation by TCC and OIOS, and then ones that seem to have been earlier disclosed or have taken place earlier. Under investigation, it just says pending. Does that mean there's no investigation yet taking place, or is there some?
I think it depends on the case. Thank you.